In the very heart of Atlanta, the federal courthouse loomed large, a structured fortress of justice where Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett's fate would soon unfold under the unequally distributed weight of legal authority. On this day, she believed, she would be vindicated. Instead, what transpired would set a revolutionary course for the political landscape and ignite a fierce engagement of citizens demanding change. The atmosphere was rife with tension as journalists swarmed the building, the buzz of anticipation amplifying the gravity of the accusations against her. Jasmine was accused of ethical violations for supposedly accepting charitable donations through Hope Forward, the organization she had so painstakingly built during the pandemic to serve her community. It was an accusation that felt ludicrous, twisting her charity work into a weapon against her. It embodied the same oppressive ideologies she had fought to dismantle throughout her career. As Jasmine stepped through those towering glass doors, she was determined to uphold her integrity, a forthright commitment forged through years of hard work and tireless advocacy. Grassroots organizations, community members she had fought for, and her supporters stood behind her, their hopes resting on her shoulders. Inside, the courtroom was elegant but sterile, oozing an atmosphere of superiority. As the moment approached, her pulse quickened. Every eye was locked onto her, including those of Justice Clarence Thomas, seated high upon the bench in his black robe, exuding an aura of authority that seemed almost oppressive. When the hearing began, the entire room weaved a silent narrative built on intimidation and fear. Jasmine's attorney leaned in, his uneasy whispers framing the gravity of her situation. "They already have their minds made up," he said, his voice laced with concern. "This hearing is a guise, a theater meant to discredit you." His words ignited an ember deep inside her, a realization that fueled her resolve against the impending storm. The court clerk began reading the charges as Jasmine raised her hand, asserting her right to speak. But before she could voice her innocence, Justice Thomas cut her off with a sharpness that rendered the air suffocating. "This is not a forum for grandstanding," he articulated, his tone unforgiving as the gavel struck down with a resounding conclusion that echoed through her core. Despite the cruel remarks, Jasmine's spirit remained unbroken. She tried again to clarify the nature of her work with Hope Forward and her deep commitment to her community, but each attempt was thwarted, leaving her feeling like a bystander in her own trial. Justice Thomas's disregard for her truth became a catalyst for something much larger than her own narrative. It sparked a collective consciousness awakening among those watching. With each assertion she made, Jasmine felt the gravity of the moment pressing down on her, a moment that should have been a representation of fairness but instead felt like a performance piece stripped of integrity. The proceedings continued without any witness testimony or opportunity for cross-examination, and thus the court moved swiftly to a verdict. "I hereby declare that Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett is suspended from her office and barred from seeking or holding any elected position for a period of 10 years. The words cut like a knife, sinking deep into her bones. Gasps echoed in the courtroom with shocked disbelief. Jasmine remained motionless, absorbing the weight of the ruling, her stony stillness more powerful than any protest or display of anger. She knew this was not an end, it was a beginning, a moment poised to expose the hidden injustices that so many had accepted as status quo. In that silence, a sense of fortitude began to rise from her heart, complicated by the collective anxiety of everyone witnessing this dark chapter in history. Outside, the headlines began to churn. The words, "Crockett silenced," echoed incessantly, framing the narrative as if her life's work could be dismissed in just a heartbeat. Yet, in the midst of this seeming despair, she felt a quiet resolve building within her. She knew she had something powerful at her fingertips, something beyond the mere implications of the court's decision. It was the sealed envelope tucked safely in her briefcase, an embodiment of defiance laden with implications that the powers that be desperately wished to keep hidden. Moments later, buoyed by her determination, Jasmine drew upon her advocacy skills like a warrior preparing for battle. She opened the envelope, revealing documents drenched in secrecy, the truth behind the facade of power and privilege. With steady hands, she unveiled a damning ledger detailing lavish gifts that Justice Thomas had received from Harlan Crow and other wealthy benefactors. Financial transactions that perfectly aligned with questionable rulings handed down by the court. "Your Honor," she announced with clarity, "what I hold in my hand are the undisclosed gifts given to a sitting Supreme Court justice, all linked to financial interests behind 8 rulings that favored Mr. Crow and his affiliates." Each word she spoke cut through the haze of despair, bringing sharp clarity and conviction that reverberated throughout the courtroom. The audience shifted in their seats, tension palpable as Jasmine continued. "These gifts and compensation amount to far more than minor infractions. They expose the intricate relationships that distort our sense of justice and ethics in this very room. If I am to be judged for implications of impropriety, then Justice Thomas must also answer." With each revelation, the courtroom was transformed, not into a place of judgment, but into a crucible of truth. Her assertions hung heavy in the air, shaking the presumptions of power that had silenced so many before her. For once, the unyielding structure of authority was being challenged by their own negligence. What Jasmine had witnessed, and what she now illuminated, sparked an insatiable hunger for the truth among the observers, echoing through the marble chambers of power. Then came a definitive moment, a request from a U.S. Deputy Counsel, standing resolute, calling for an immediate recess and further investigation into the evidence presented. It was more than just a procedural tactic. It felt like the unears that had turned slowly towards the truth. As media coverage exploded, Jasmine realized that the courtroom had evolved into a platform not just for her defense, but for systemic upheaval. A chance to bring light to the darkness that had long been overlooked. Outside those walls, as word of her revelation spread, the chorus of people demanding action grew louder. The nation was watching. The realization dawned on many that this fight was no longer merely about her or the office she held. It was much larger. It was a significant moment, a collective movement for accountability and transparency, igniting a wildfire among constituents across the country who recognized the pervasive injustice that had festered for too long. Under the weight of her courage, the entire political narrative shifted. The conversation evolved beyond courtroom drama. It cascaded into a re-envisioned discussion about ethics, privilege, and the moral obligations of the judiciary. Her story of dignity became a clarion call, one that rallied citizens from diverse backgrounds to rise and articulate their demands for accountability and reform. Jasmine returned to her constituents, not as a defeated politician, but rather as a beacon of possibility. She held town halls that transformed spaces into arenas of dialogue. Rooms flooded with voices aspiring for change, recollections of injustices and dreams of a reformed future, each one echoing Jasmine's own journey. Communities began to organize and mobilize, echoing Jasmine's courage. They wrote letters, called their representatives, and took to the streets demanding action against the systemic inequalities that governed their lives. They challenged long-held assumptions about the untouchable nature of power and justice, reminding each other that democracy thrived when the people stood united, engaging with the processes that claimed to serve them. In the wake of the inflammatory courtroom session, Jasmine began structuring the Judicial Transparency Act, a legislative proposal demanding disclosure of gifts and financial interests of judges and justices, calls for rigorous audits, and compassionate support for judicial whistleblowers. As she drafted the proposals, she involved constituents, lawyers, and concerned citizens from across the political spectrum, understanding that reform must be participatory, inclusive, and comprehensive. With these proposed reforms, she sought to ensure that no one, no matter their position, could evade accountability, serving as a powerful reminder that legislation can only serve its purpose if it reinforces integrity without compromise. The act would strive to illuminate the system at every juncture, to foster civilian oversight, and inscribe into law the principles of honesty. The growing demand for the Judicial Transparency Act morphed into a cultural phenomenon transcending political divides, a call for integrity that refused to yield against the tides of oppression. Across the country, engulfed in the energy that Jasmine inspired, activists organized campaigns, initiated petitions, and engaged in spirited debates about the standards needed to create a just system that upholds democracy as it should. As Jasmine's community gatherings reached a collective crescendo, she witnessed the profound impact of her work. She saw fragile hope burgeon into fierce determination, the realization that they could shape the narrative and effect lasting change. In those moments, she became more than a representative. She evolved into a leader, a catalyst for civic engagement and accountability. Families who had experienced systemic neglect shared their stories of struggle, while youth leaders rallied their peers in classrooms, understanding that activism is not merely a duty but an inherited legacy. The energy was contagious, spreading across student bodies and permeating social media platforms. They initiated campaigns, leveraging hashtags, organizing community awareness programs, and demanding their legislators act decisively against injustice. In the weeks following her stand in court, Jasmine Crockett emerged triumphant, not through the strength of her position but through the solidarity of the people behind her and the transformative nature of truth. She had succeeded in catalyzing a national dialogue about the ethical responsibilities of those who wield power and influence. Every town hall she conducted breathed new life into her narrative. The laughter, the tears, the shared victories served as mechanisms for solidarity. A genuine connection formed between Jasmine and her constituents, one that solidified through mutual respect and shared resolve to uphold justice. This engagement became their lifeblood, a testament to the power of civic discourse in a democracy still grappling with its principles. Then came the day Jasmine submitted the Judicial Transparency Act. The months of hard work culminated in a proud moment, an act of unity among citizens, echoing their commitment to justice. The legislation saw bipartisan support. It charged through the halls of Congress, inspiring lawmakers to reject the corruption that swelled behind closed doors. Jasmine's fearless exposure of the elite's improprieties ushered in a seismic shift in public consciousness. It stirred the appetite for accountability in all segments of government. Front-page stories echoed her testimony, words immortalized in opinions and editorials championing justice and ethical integrity. The phrase, "You didn't take down a man. You brought the whole system back to the ground," transcended its initial context, inspiring a called-out acknowledgement that resonated through every level of civic engagement. The courtroom that had once served as the stage for Jasmine's humiliation became a place of empowerment. Jasmine transformed the narrative of persecution into something more, a collective movement towards a justice system aligned to the people it served. Through rallies and marches, she inspired a fervent belief that every citizen has the power to impact change. As time progressed, Jasmine Crockett stood as a beacon of hope. Her actions laid the groundwork for future generations demanding transparency. She encouraged citizens to remember that democracy is not a spectator sport but a collective duty. Each person has a role to play in preserving and defending the integrity of its institutions. Returning to her home turf, Jasmine bore witness to a thriving movement inspired by her words, her fight. Formerly unheard voices began rising with clarity, sharing their stories far and wide, transforming individual battles into communal calls for justice. The movement shifted and adapted with the times, reflecting a resilience capable of taking on those in power. In the months that ensued after her captivating moment in the courtroom, Jasmine Crockett not only became a unifying force but also pushed the envelope toward actionable change. The Judicial Transparency Act was more than a proposal. It fostered a culture of civic involvement, calling upon citizens to hold their government responsible. What began as a legislative fight had morphed into a broader campaign interwoven deeply into the fabric of society. A push towards justice that galvanized people from all walks of life to participate, pushing back against injustice and demanding a more honorable future. Jasmine reminded everyone, the embers ignited today must be tended with care, empathy, and action, allowing them to flourish into a blaze of righteousness. As she stood before her supporters, from mothers and fathers to students and elders, Jasmine saw the movement transcending her own aspirations. In their laughter and smiles, she recognized a powerful rallying cry, a call to action that demanded change at every level. She stood resolute, reflecting their stories, the essence of democracy infused with the power of collective action. In short, Jasmine Crockett transformed the landscape, her identity woven into the fabric of a renewed civil movement fueled by the desire for a transparent and accountable judiciary, and the conviction that true justice belongs to the people. And with that conviction, Jasmine stepped forward, not just in her journey but as a representative of countless voices crying for justice. Together they shouted, "Enough is enough," a call reverberating through history. A moment of profound awakening that signaled the relentless pursuit of justice was only just beginning. The battle against systemic power might be long and arduous, but with unity, integrity, and the relentless tenacity of ordinary people guiding their way, they would carve a new path. A legacy of accountability, truth, and unwavering resolve, reclaiming a democracy that serves not just the privileged few but all of its citizens. Jasmine Crockett had not only survived the storm, she had become the storm, a relentless force forging a new future, reminding every individual that they wield the power to shape their own destinies, ignite change, and illuminate the path toward a more just society where the echoes of the past guide the promise of tomorrow. And thus, somewhere in the halls of power, where applause and celebration waned, the true noise of accountability echoed. A symphony of voices united in purpose, demanding that justice be restored and that the ideals of truth be preserved for generations to come.